Ambassador Zethkar stood before the vast holographic display in the Galactic Council chambers, his four arms gesticulating wildly as he addressed the assembled representatives of 47 civilizations. The crystalline being's usually composed demeanor had cracked under the weight of desperation. Esteemed colleagues, the Void Swarm has consumed another 3 systems in the Outer Rim. The Calarian Defense Fleet, our most advanced military force, lasted exactly 14 minutes against their assault. His voice resonated through the translation matrices, carrying undertones of fear that transcended species barriers. The massive chamber fell silent, except for the soft humming of environmental systems, maintaining atmosphere for dozens of different life forms. Representatives shifted nervously in their specialized seating arrangements. Some leaked pheromones of anxiety, others changed color patterns that displayed distress. High Chancellor Mordun of the hegemony leaned forward, her scaled face grim. "How many ships did we lose this time?" "All of them." Zethkar's admission sent ripples of shock through the assembly. 17 dreadnoughts, 43 cruisers, and over 200 support vessels, gone. The Void Swarm didn't even slow down. For 300 years, the galaxy had known relative peace under the Galactic Council's guidance. Trade flowed between systems, conflicts were resolved through diplomacy, and technological advancement had reached heights that most civilizations believed represented the pinnacle of achievement. The greatest threats were pirates, rogue asteroids, and the occasional territorial dispute that could be settled with economic sanctions. Then came the Void Swarm. They appeared from the dark space between galaxies, ships that seemed to absorb light itself, crewed by entities that defied all understanding of biology or technology. Their vessels moved without visible propulsion, ignored the laws of physics that governed all known technology, and consumed everything in their path. Planets, stars, entire civilizations vanished into their dark hulls, processed into some unknown form of energy that fed their endless hunger. "What do our military analysts recommend?" asked General Thoxon, the hegemony's top strategist, his insectoid features clicking with nervous energy. Fleet Commander Veltar, an aquatic being whose tank suit bubbled with agitation, activated his holographic display. "Our conventional weapons have proven completely ineffective. Energy shields that can withstand supernova-level explosions crumple like paper. Plasma cannons that can vaporize asteroids don't even scratch their hulls. Even our quantum torpedoes, weapons that can tear holes in space-time itself, simply disappear when they make contact with their ships." "What about the ancient weapons?" suggested someone from the back. "The predecessor artifacts?" Zethkar's crystalline form darkened. "We deployed the Stellar Lance 3 days ago, a weapon capable of igniting stars. It struck their lead vessel directly." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. "The ship absorbed the energy and grew larger." Panic began to spread through the chamber. Representatives started talking over each other in dozens of languages, their translation devices struggling to keep up with the overlapping conversations. Some called for evacuation protocols, others for last-ditch research into new weapons. A few suggested surrender, though none could explain what surrender would even mean to entities that consumed entire worlds. "Order! Order!" Chancellor Mordun's voice boomed through the chamber. "We are the Galactic Council. We have faced extinction events before and survived. There must be something we haven't tried." "There is one option," said a voice from the human delegation section. The chamber fell silent. Every eye, sensor, and perceptual organ turned toward the small raised platform where the human representatives sat. Humans had only joined the Galactic Council 47 years ago, making them the newest and arguably most primitive members. Their technology lagged behind galactic standards by centuries, their military was laughably small, and their single planet was so far from the galactic core that most species forgot they existed. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood up, her simple blue uniform contrasting sharply with the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by other delegates. She was young for a diplomat, barely past her 40th year, with short black hair and eyes that seemed to hold depths that many aliens found unsettling. "You have an option, human?" Chancellor Morden's tone carried barely concealed condescension. "Your species has been part of the galactic community for less than 50 years. What could you possibly offer that our greatest minds have not already considered?" Sarah smiled, and something about that expression sent an involuntary shiver through several nearby delegates. "We offer ourselves. Humanity requests permission to engage the Void Swarm." The silence that followed was deafening. Then the chamber erupted in what could generously be called laughter, though it sounded more like the death throes of 1,000 different species. The idea was so absurd that even the translation devices seemed to struggle with conveying the appropriate level of ridicule. "The humans want to fight the Void Swarm," wheezed Ambassador Zethkar, his crystalline form flickering with what passed for amusement among his people. "Your entire fleet consists of what? 30 vessels? Ships that still use chemical propulsion for sublight travel? Metal hulls held together with welding?" 47 ships. Actually, Sarah corrected calmly. "And we've made some improvements recently." General Thoxon's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. "Child species, you do not understand. The Void Swarm has destroyed fleets 1,000 times larger than yours. The Calarian Armada possessed technology that your people won't develop for another 1,000 years if you survive that long. What makes you think your primitive weapons could accomplish anything?" Sarah remained standing, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture that suggested military training. "Because we've been studying your defeats. Every engagement, every tactical decision, every weapon employed. And we've noticed something that none of you seem to have considered." "And what is that?" Chancellor Morden asked, her tone suggesting she was humoring a particularly slow child. "You've all been fighting conventionally, using your most advanced technology, your strongest weapons, your most sophisticated tactics. You've been trying to out-technology the Void Swarm." "Of course we have," Fleet Commander Veltar bubbled indignantly. "We are civilized beings. We fight with honor and precision and the accumulated wisdom of millennia." "Exactly." Sarah's smile widened. "You're civilized. The Void Swarm isn't. There's something else entirely, something that doesn't follow the rules you've built your entire understanding of warfare around. So perhaps it's time to try fighting like something else entirely." "What do you mean?" asked a delegate from the Crystalline Collective. "We mean fighting like humans." The way she said it made several delegates unconsciously move away from the human section. There was something in her tone, something primal and predatory that activated deep-seated survival instincts across multiple species. Ambassador Zethkar's form stabilized as his amusement faded. "Explain." Sarah activated her own holographic display, showing star charts and tactical analyses that were notably different from the polished presentations the other species had given. Her data was raw, brutal, and disturbingly comprehensive. Every species in this chamber evolved as either prey or predator, but you all transcended those roles through intelligence and civilization. You learned to work together, to build rather than destroy, to create rather than consume. It's made you great." She paused, looking around the chamber. "It's also made you weak." The insult should have sparked outrage, but instead it created an uncomfortable silence. Something about the human's demeanor suggested she wasn't trying to offend them so much as state a clinical fact. "Humans never fully transcended our nature. We learned to control it, to channel it, to point it in useful directions. But we never eliminated it. Every human carries within them the genetic memory of 1,000,000 years of being the most efficient predators our world ever produced. We conquered our entire planet not through superior technology or divine intervention, but through persistence, adaptability, and an absolute refusal to give up. She changed the display to show human historical records, images of warfare that made several delegates look away in distress. We have a saying on Earth, if you want peace, prepare for war. But we have another saying that's more relevant here. Sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to unleash a bigger monster. You're suggesting that humans are monsters? Chancellor Morden asked carefully. I'm suggesting that compared to the Void Swarm, we might be the right kind of monster. Sarah's display shifted to show human military doctrine, ship designs, and weapon systems that looked crude compared to galactic standard technology, but possessed a brutal efficiency that was somehow disturbing. Give us permission to engage the enemy. If we fail, you lose nothing you wouldn't have lost anyway. If you succeed, which is impossible, what then? General Thoxon interrupted. Sarah's smile returned. And this time every being in the chamber recognized it for what it was, the expression of a predator that had found prey. Then the universe learns why humanity spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing things that were bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than we were. The debate that followed lasted for 6 hours. Some delegates argued that allowing humans to engage the Void Swarm was tantamount to suicide. Others pointed out that conventional tactics had already failed spectacularly. A few suggested that humanity's request was actually an elaborate form of species suicide, a way to die fighting rather than waiting to be consumed. In the end, it was Ambassador Zethkar who cast the deciding vote. The Crystalline Collective has existed for over 2 million years, he announced. In all that time, we have never encountered a problem that could not be solved through logical analysis and technological advancement. But logic and technology have failed us here. He turned to face the human delegation. Perhaps it is time to try something else. The vote was close, 24 in favor, 23 against. But it was enough. Sarah stood once more, her expression now completely serious. We'll need 3 days to position our fleet. I suggest you evacuate all civilian populations from the projected battle zone. How large a zone? Asked Chancellor Morden. Sarah consulted her datapad. Approximately 4 solar systems just to be safe. 4 systems? For a battle involving 47 ships? Trust me, Chancellor. You don't want to be close when humans go to war. As the session ended and delegates began filing out, many cast worried glances toward the human section. Something fundamental had just changed in the galaxy's power structure, though none of them could quite put their finger on what it was. Ambassador Zethkar lingered as the chamber emptied, his crystalline form refracting the dim lighting in complex patterns. Human Chen? May I ask you something? Of course. Your species has been remarkably peaceful since joining the galactic community. Your world has no standing military. Your ships carry minimal armaments, and your people seem genuinely committed to diplomatic solutions. Yet you speak of war as if it were your natural element. Sarah gathered her materials slowly, considering her response. Do you know what we call the period of peace on our world, Ambassador? The time since we achieved global cooperation and ended large-scale warfare? Enlightenment? The Golden Age? We call it peacetime, the temporary absence of war, because deep down every human knows that peace is not our natural state. Peace is something we have to constantly choose, constantly work toward, constantly maintain against our own nature. She turned to face him fully. But when something threatens what we've built, when something comes for our families, our children, our future, we remember what we really are. And what is that? Sarah's final smile was different from the others, sadder but somehow more terrible. The species that looked at everything else on our planet and decided it belonged to us. She walked away, leaving Zethkar alone in the vast chamber, wondering if the Galactic Council had just made the greatest mistake in its history, or its only hope for salvation. 3 days later, the human fleet arrived at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, where the latest Void Swarm incursion was expected to emerge from dark space. 47 ships against an enemy that had consumed entire armadas without slowing down. But the ships that emerged from human space were not the same vessels that had joined the galactic community decades earlier. They had been changed, modified, upgraded in ways that defied conventional understanding of human technology. Their hulls were no longer simple metal, but something darker, something that seemed to drink in light like the void itself. And on every ship, painted in letters large enough to be seen from orbit, was the same message in dozens of galactic languages. Cry havoc, and let slip the dogs of war. The universe was about to remember why humanity had spent millennia learning how to kill gods. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, watching the dark space beyond Kepler 442's outer rim through sensors that no galactic species would have recognized. The modifications to the human fleet had been completed in record time, but then again, humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day they first learned about the Void Swarm. "Captain, we're detecting spatial distortions," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres from the sensor station. Her voice was calm, professional, but Webb could hear the underlying tension. Every human in the fleet knew they were about to face something that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than their own. "How many ships?" Webb asked, though he suspected the number would be irrelevant. "Hard to say, sir. The distortions are massive. Whatever's coming through, it's big." Webb nodded and opened a channel to the rest of the fleet. 46 other ships, each one a testament to human ingenuity and humanity's particular brand of madness. The galaxy thought humans were primitive, still using crude chemical rockets and metal hulls. They had no idea that humans had simply been hiding their true capabilities. "All ships, this is Prometheus. Remember your training. Remember why we're here. The galaxy has forgotten what it means to be apex predators. It's time to remind them." The space around Kepler 442 began to tear open, reality folding in ways that violated every known law of physics. But humans had encountered impossible things before. They had a talent for making the impossible seem routine through sheer bloody-minded determination. "Sir, they're emerging," Torres announced unnecessarily. Everyone on the bridge could see the tear in space widening, revealing the darkness beyond. Not the darkness of empty space, but something deeper, hungrier. The first Void Swarm ship pushed through the dimensional rift like a cancer growing through healthy tissue. It was impossibly large, easily the size of a small moon, its surface appearing to absorb all light that touched it. But Webb had studied every recorded encounter with these entities. He knew their weaknesses, even if no other species had figured them out yet. "Tactical. What are you reading?" he asked. "No energy signatures, no emissions of any kind. It's like looking at a hole in space." Lieutenant Parker's voice carried a note of awe. "I'm reading gravitational anomalies, though. Whatever that thing is, it has mass but no matter we can detect." More ships emerged from the rift, each one a nightmare of impossible geometry and reality-defying physics. 50 ships, then 100, then more than sensors could accurately count. They moved with purpose, spreading out in a formation that suggested intelligence while following patterns that hurt to think about too deeply. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Galactic Fleet," reported the communications officer. Webb grimaced. He had hoped the other species would follow his advice about maintaining distance, but apparently some of them had decided to observe the battle firsthand. "Put it through." Admiral Trixnall's translated voice filled the bridge, crackling with static and what sounded like suppressed panic. "Human vessels. We are reading massive void swarm emergence in your area. Recommend immediate retreat to minimum safe distance. Negative, Admiral, Webb replied calmly. We're exactly where we need to be. Captain Webb, you are facing over 200 Void Swarm vessels with fewer than 50 ships. This is not bravery, this is madness. Webb smiled grimly. Sir, there's something you need to understand about humans. We've been called mad by every other species on our planet, and they all learned the same lesson eventually. Which is? That there's a difference between madness and just not caring about the odds. Webb cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. Are the modifications holding? Yes, sir. All ships report successful integration. The additions are responding normally. Webb nodded. The modifications to the human fleet hadn't just been technological. Humanity had made contact with something else. Something that existed in the spaces between reality that the Void Swarm used for travel. It had cost them, but the price had been acceptable. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had always been good at making deals with devils. Captain, the Void Swarm is moving, Torres announced. They're accelerating toward the inner system. Let them come. All ships, activate the Prometheus Protocol. Across the human fleet, drives that had never appeared on any galactic database came online. Not fusion, not antimatter, not even exotic matter propulsion. Something else entirely, something that drew power from the same dimensional spaces that the Void Swarm inhabited. The human ships began to move in ways that violated every principle of known physics. Sir, we're matching their acceleration, Torres reported with obvious disbelief. Actually, we're exceeding it. The Void Swarm ships had been moving at velocities that should have been impossible for anything with mass. But the human ships were moving faster, their hulls shimmering with energies that seemed to bend light around them. Weapon status? All ships report ready, Captain. Ammunition is loaded and blessed. Webb almost smiled at that last part. The galactic species would have found the concept ridiculous, but then they didn't understand that humans had always known the universe contained things that couldn't be fought with conventional weapons. Sometimes you needed bullets that had been blessed by every major religion on Earth, forged from metals that had never existed in normal space, and loaded with the collective will of a species that refused to accept defeat. Range to target? 50,000 kilometers and closing. On the main screen, the Void Swarm formation was becoming clearer. They moved like a school of predatory fish, following currents in spacetime that only they could sense. But they had encountered human fishing fleets, and they were about to learn that humans had been apex predators in every environment they had ever encountered. Sir, they're launching something, Torres announced. Multiple projectiles incoming. Webb watched as the Void Swarm ships expelled clouds of smaller objects, each one moving with purpose toward the human fleet. Previous encounters had shown these were some kind of reality-distorting weapon that could unmake matter at the quantum level. Point defense systems online. All ships, remember. We're not trying to destroy these things with conventional weapons. We're trying to piss them off. The human ships opened fire with weapons that looked like crude projectile systems to galactic observers. But the projectiles they launched weren't made of normal matter. They were crystallized fragments of human determination, given physical form through technologies that the species had developed in secret over the past century. Each bullet carried with it the collective will of 8 billion humans who refused to be prey. The projectiles struck the incoming Void Swarm weapons, and something impossible happened. They stopped. The reality-distorting effects simply ceased, as if the universe had suddenly remembered its own rules. What just happened? Torres asked. We reminded them that reality is negotiable, Webb replied, and humans have always been good negotiators. The Void Swarm seemed to pause, their formation wavering for the first time in recorded history. Something had just happened that didn't fit their understanding of how the universe worked. "Sir, I'm reading energy buildup from the lead ship," Parker reported. "Massive power spike, unlike anything we've seen before." Webb nodded grimly. Now came the real test. The Void Swarm was about to deploy their primary weapon, the one that had consumed entire star systems in seconds. "All ships, prepare for reality storm. Activate cognitive shielding." The lead Void Swarm vessel began to glow with an anti-light that somehow made the surrounding space darker. Energy that existed in dimensions humans couldn't even name began to build to critical levels. When it discharged, everything in the target area would simply cease to exist, not destroyed, but removed from reality entirely. But humans had encountered things that could edit reality before. They had learned to fight them by being more stubborn than the universe itself. The reality storm struck the human fleet like a tide of absolute nothingness, washing over ships that should have been erased from existence. But instead of disappearing, the human vessels began to glow with their own impossible light. Not the clean energy of advanced galactic technology, but something older, darker, more primal. "Damage report," Webb called out as the storm passed. "No damage to any ship, sir. Actually, I'm reading increased power levels across the fleet." Webb smiled for the first time since the battle began. The modifications were working perfectly. Humans had learned long ago that there were things in the universe that fed on reality itself. They had also learned how to starve them. "Signal to all ships. Commence Phase 2. The human fleet began to change, their hulls shifting and flowing like liquid metal. But this wasn't technology in any sense that galactic science would recognize. It was something else entirely, something that existed at the intersection of physics and metaphysics. The ships were no longer just vessels. They had become something else, something that the Void Swarm suddenly recognized as a threat. "Sir, the Void Swarm is retreating?" Torres sounded shocked. On the screen, the massive alien ships were indeed pulling back, their formation becoming defensive for the first time in galactic history. They had encountered something that they didn't understand, something that challenged their fundamental nature. "Not retreating, Lieutenant. Regrouping. They're trying to figure out what we are." Webb opened a channel to the galactic fleet, which was maintaining position well beyond the battle zone. "Admiral Trixnell, this is Captain Webb. You might want to record this for posterity." "Captain Webb, what are you doing? Your ships? They're not showing up on our sensors anymore." "That's because we're not entirely in normal space anymore, Admiral. We're fighting the Void Swarm on their own terms." "That's impossible. No species has ever successfully entered dimensional space and returned." Webb's response was cut off as the Void Swarm launched their second wave attack. This time they weren't trying to erase the human ships from reality. They were trying something else, something that had never failed them before. They were trying to consume them. Tendrils of darkness reached out from the Void Swarm vessels, seeking to engulf and digest the human ships. It was their ultimate weapon, the ability to absorb energy, matter, and even the concept of existence itself. But the tendrils stopped just short of the human fleet, recoiling as if they had touched something poisonous. "What's happening?" Admiral Trixnell demanded. "They're trying to eat us," Webb replied calmly. "But humans learned a long time ago how to be indigestible." The truth was more complex than he could explain over an open channel. Humans had indeed made contact with entities from dimensional space decades ago. Not the Void Swarm, but their ancient enemies. Things that existed in the spaces between thoughts and fed on different forms of energy entirely. The modifications to the human fleet hadn't just been technological, they had been metaphysical. Each ship now carried within its hull a fragment of something that the Void Swarm had been fleeing from since the birth of the universe. "All ships, this is Webb. Time to show them what 8 billion years of human nightmares can accomplish when properly focused." The human fleet began to advance again, But now they weren't moving through normal space. They were moving through the same dimensional layers that the Void Swarm used, hunting them in their own territory. And for the first time in galactic history, the predators had become prey. The Void Swarm formation began to collapse as individual ships tried to flee in different directions. But there was nowhere to run. The humans had turned dimensional space itself into a trap, using principles that no galactic species had ever imagined possible. "Sir, they're trying to retreat to dark space," Torres reported. "Let them try," Webb said grimly. "They're about to learn that humans have been afraid of the dark for a very long time. We've gotten quite good at making it afraid of us instead." The battle in dimensional space lasted 17 minutes by standard galactic time, though for the human crews experiencing it, the fight seemed to stretch across eons and compress into heartbeats simultaneously. Captain Webb watched through sensors that tracked movement across 7 different layers of reality as his fleet systematically dismantled forces that had terrorized the galaxy for decades. "Captain, we have a problem," Lieutenant Commander Torres announced, her voice tight with concern. "The Void Swarm isn't just retreating. They're calling for reinforcements." Webb studied the tactical display, watching as massive tiers in dimensional space began opening throughout the sector. Not just a few ships this time, but entire fleets emerging from the dark spaces between galaxies. Thousands of vessels, each one larger than anything the galaxy had ever constructed. "How many are we looking at?" he asked. "I'm reading dimensional signatures for over 5,000 ships, sir, and they're still coming through." Webb opened a channel to the human fleet. "All ships, this is Prometheus. Looks like we got their attention. Prepare for Phase 3 operations." Admiral Trixinal's panicked voice crackled through the communications array. "Captain Webb, our long-range sensors are detecting massive Void Swarm reinforcements. You need to retreat immediately. No force in galactic history could stand against what's coming." "Admiral, with respect, galactic history is about to get a new chapter," Webb replied. "All human vessels, you know what to do." Across the fleet, captains and crews began activating systems that had never been tested in combat, technologies that existed at the very edge of what the human mind could comprehend. The modifications to their ships hadn't been the extent of humanity's preparation. They had been merely the beginning. "Sir, quantum entanglement communicators are online," reported the communications officer. "We have direct link to Earth Command." Webb nodded. "Put me through to the Secretary General." The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Elena Vasquez, the woman who had guided humanity's secret military development for the past 3 decades. Behind her, Webb could see the war room deep beneath Geneva, where representatives from every nation on Earth were monitoring the battle. "Marcus, the whole world is watching. How are we doing out there?" "We've confirmed the tactical assessments were correct, Madam Secretary. The Void Swarm operates exactly as our dimensional contacts predicted, but they've called in their entire regional fleet. We're looking at something like 5,000 ships." Vasquez smiled grimly. "Then it's time for the big reveal. Authorization code Omega 77. All stops are pulled, Captain. Show the galaxy what humanity has really been building for the past 50 years. Webb turned to his crew. "You heard the Secretary General. Activate the Terra Protocol." What happened next defied every law of physics that galactic science had established over millions of years of study. The space around Earth, 8 systems away from the battle, began to ripple and fold, not through any technology the galaxy would recognize, but through principles that humans had learned from things far older than the Void Swarm. "Captain," Torres whispered, "I'm reading spatial distortions throughout the entire Sol system. Whatever we're doing, it's massive." Webb watched the sensor displays with satisfaction. Humanity had spent decades preparing for this moment, building weapons and defenses that existed as much in the realm of concept and will as in physical reality. The galaxy had always underestimated humans because they measured advancement by technology alone. They had never considered that some species might take entirely different approaches to survival. The first sign that something fundamental had changed came when the Void Swarm reinforcements suddenly stopped emerging from dark space. Their dimensional rifts began to destabilize, as if something was actively interfering with their ability to travel between realities. "Sir, we're detecting new contacts," Torres announced. "Ships emerging from dimensional space, but not Void Swarm. The energy signatures are different." On the main screen, new vessels began to appear throughout the battle zone. They looked nothing like human ships, or indeed like anything any galactic species had ever constructed. They seemed to be made of crystallized starlight and solid darkness, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Who are they?" demanded Admiral Trixnall over the communicator. Webb smiled. "Our allies. The galaxy is about to meet the reason the Void Swarm has been running toward our part of the universe for the past millennium." The truth was something that would have shattered galactic civilization if revealed too early. The Void Swarm wasn't native to normal space. They were refugees, fleeing from something far worse in the deep spaces between galaxies. Humanity had made contact with their pursuers decades ago and struck a bargain that would reshape the universe. The new ships moved with purpose, surrounding the Void Swarm reinforcements in formations that defied three-dimensional thinking. When they opened fire, their weapons didn't destroy the enemy vessels so much as edit them out of existence, unweaving their fundamental structure from reality itself. "Captain Webb," came a new voice over the communications array, speaking in harmonics that seemed to bypass human ears and communicate directly with the mind. "The agreement is complete. The fleeing devourers are contained. Your species has fulfilled its part of the compact." Webb recognized the voice of the entity humans had designated Contact Prime, though its true name existed in frequencies that human throats couldn't pronounce. "Understood. What about the stragglers?" "They will be processed according to the terms. Your galaxy will no longer suffer their presence." Throughout the battle zone, the remaining Void Swarm vessels were being systematically captured rather than destroyed. The entities that humans had allied with had purposes for their ancient enemies that went far beyond simple elimination. "Sir," Torres called out, "I'm detecting movement from the Galactic Fleet. They're approaching our position." Webb sighed. He had known this moment would come, but he wasn't looking forward to it. "Open a channel to all galactic vessels. Full-spectrum broadcast." Admiral Trixnall's face appeared on the screen, along with representatives from dozens of other species. Their expressions ranged from awe to terror to something approaching worship. "Captain Webb, what we have witnessed here is impossible. Our sensors are recording energy signatures that shouldn't exist, ships that violate every known law of physics, and weapon systems that appear to edit reality itself. How is any of this possible?" Webb looked at the assembled faces of galactic leadership and made a decision that would change everything. "Admiral, the truth is that humanity has been preparing for the Void Swarm since we first learned of their existence, but not in the way you think." He activated a holographic display showing star charts that revealed the true scope of human operations. Secret bases in dark space, research facilities that existed in multiple dimensions, communication networks that spanned galaxies. We made contact with the Void Swarm's enemies 53 years ago. Entities that exist in the spaces between realities, feeding on different forms of energy entirely. They had been hunting the Void Swarm across the universe for millions of years, but they needed something the Swarm couldn't anticipate. "Which was?" Chancellor Mordoon asked, her scaled features tight with apprehension. "A species crazy enough to invite ancient cosmic horrors into our reality in exchange for the power to protect our galaxy." The silence that followed was profound. Representatives from dozens of species struggled to process the implications of what they had just learned. "You made a deal with entities from outside reality?" Ambassador Zethkar's crystalline form flickered with what might have been horror. Do you understand what you've done? Webb's expression hardened. I understand that we've saved this galaxy from extinction. I understand that while you were all debating and analyzing and following proper protocols, we were making the hard choices necessary for survival. But at what cost? Demanded General Thoxon. What did you promise these entities in return? Webb was quiet for a long moment. Something that humanity has always been willing to sacrifice for the greater good. Our innocence. The implications of that statement hit the galactic representatives like a physical blow. They were beginning to understand that humanity hadn't just allied with cosmic entities. They had fundamentally altered their own nature to become something that could coexist with beings from outside reality. The agreement is simple, Webb continued. The entities deal with the Void Swarm and other threats from dark space. In exchange, humanity serves as their agents in this reality when needed. We become the bridge between what is and what exists beyond the boundaries of normal space. You've turned yourselves into something inhuman, whispered Admiral Trixnell. No, Webb corrected. We've become more human than ever before. Because being human has always meant being willing to sacrifice everything to protect what we love. He turned to face the camera directly, his eyes holding depths that seemed to stretch into infinity. The galaxy is safe now. The Void Swarm threat is ended. But you all need to understand that the universe is far stranger and more dangerous than you ever imagined. And humanity is now something else. Something that exists in the spaces between normal and nightmare. Contact Prime's harmonics filled the communication channel once more. The compact is sealed. Your galaxy enters a new phase of existence. The young hunters of Earth will serve as guardians of the boundary between realities. All who dwell in normal space may rest safely. Webb nodded. You heard them. Humanity will stand watch at the edges of reality itself. The galaxy can return to peace, knowing that we'll handle the things that go bump in the dark between the stars. As the alien vessels began to fade back into dimensional space, taking their captive Void Swarm with them, the human fleet remained. But they looked different now, their ships shifting and flowing with energies that belonged to no known science. Captain Webb, Chancellor Morden said carefully, what happens now? How do we relate to humanity, knowing what you've become? Webb smiled, and for a moment he looked like the young officer who had first gazed up at the stars and dreamed of exploration and discovery. The same way you always have, Chancellor. We're still human. We still value peace, cooperation, and the bonds between civilizations. We're just better equipped to handle the things that threaten those values. He paused, looking out at the stars that no longer held any mysteries that could frighten humanity. But you might want to update your diplomatic protocols. When humanity speaks in council chambers from now on, you're not just hearing the voice of one species, you're hearing the voice of something that has looked into the abyss between realities and made it blink first. The transmission ended, leaving the galactic fleet alone in space, with the knowledge that their universe had just become a very different place. Humanity had not just defeated the Void Swarm. They had transcended the very concept of defeat by becoming something that existed beyond the boundaries of victory and loss. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy would learn to live with the knowledge that their newest members were no longer entirely what they appeared to be. Trade would continue, diplomacy would flourish, and civilization would advance as it always had. But in the dark spaces between stars, in the dimensional depths where nightmares were born and ancient hungers stirred, humanity would stand watch. No longer the youngest species in the galaxy, but perhaps its oldest guardians, protecting realities that most civilizations couldn't even imagine. The universe had trembled when humanity joined the war, but it had shaken to its foundations when it realized that humanity had already won a war that no one else even knew was being fought. And in the depths of space, Captain Marcus Webb and the crews of 47 impossible ships continued their patrol, standing guard against things that existed in the spaces between thoughts, ensuring that the galaxy's peaceful sleep would never again be troubled by the hungry darkness that dwelt beyond the edges of reality itself.